Okay, today we're going to talk about Chapter 2, Section 1, Spain Claims an Empire. Let's remember our essential question for the chapter: how did Europeans transform life in the Americas? So the first key question is, why did the Europeans want to explore the Americas? But before we answer that question, we have to understand that exploration wasn't about the Americas at first. It was about establishing a trade route to Asia. At the time, Italian and Arab merchants were those that were in control of the Asian trade market. The princes of Western Europe wanted to establish a trade route by going directly to Asia, and that would have to entail going around the continent of Africa. Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal financed many journeys that would become known as the Age of Discovery. And under Prince Henry, new ships were developed, such as the Caravel, which had triangular sails to go forward through the wind, and square sails that would allow the wind to push the ship in the direction they needed to go. And Bartolomé Diaz was one of Henry the Navigator's principal sailors that made it to the tip of Africa, whereas Vasco da Gama was the first to actually sail all the way to Asia. This created a new market for the rest of Europe that would ultimately get many of these countries very, very wealthy. On this slide, you see Vasco da Gama's first voyage to India in 1497 into 1499. You notice that the black line is essentially the route in which many people from Europe had to go through in order to establish contact with Asia. And you now notice also da Gama's route that really kind of creeps along the coast of Africa. Not to be outdone by Portugal, Spain wanted to establish a trade route to Asia as well. Before da Gama's voyage, an Italian sailor, who I think most of us know by name, Christopher Columbus, thought he could find a faster route to Asia by going east. And this is where we actually start to make contact with what is today what we know as the Americas. The voyages of Christopher Columbus, although intended to be a water route to Asia, actually become a brand new excursion in which we discover a brand new world. The driving forces of this brand new world are the countries of Portugal and Spain. Now, due to a surge in exploration, Spain and Portugal started to kind of fight over who owned what as they were claiming land in the New World. They both happened to be Catholic countries, and they both answered to their spiritual advisor, who was the Pope. The Pope then kind of came up with a solution, and he drew this line that would give some land to Spain and some land claimed to Portugal. This was known as the line of demarcation. Portugal felt that this line really favored Spain. So as time went on, a treaty was signed, and this is known as the Treaty of Tordesillas, which moved this line of demarcation farther to the west, which would give Portugal much land that is what is now known as Brazil. The three goals of exploration, in no particular order, were to spread Christianity through the use of missionaries. This would expand the role of the Catholic Church throughout the world, also expanding the empires of both Spain and Portugal would increase their power around the world, and last was to obtain more wealth. This was developed through an economic system known as mercantilism. Mercantilism is essentially sending goods and other products back to the home country to be sold at a higher price. In this slide, we learn how America gets its name. The explorer Amerigo Vespucci realized that he was not in Asia and started kind of drawing up the map that would later be taken by a German map maker known as Waldseemüller. And inspired by this map, he names the lands that were drawn by Vespucci America. Also in this slide, we're going to learn a little bit about Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan and his crew was actually the first crew to sail successfully around the world. But Magellan actually ends up dying in a battle in the Philippines. In the next couple of slides, we're going to see both the Waldseemüller's map, and there will also be a video on Magellan's route to Asia. And yes, I realized I just said route, but I think you know what I meant. The next key question is, why did Native American civilizations fall so quickly? We could also rephrase it as, how did Spain claim a new empire? The Spanish had what were known as conquistadors, or conquerors. These were generals that were sent to conquer the Americas. And as such, these conquerors had a little bit of luck and a little bit of help. We're going to start with Hernando Cortez, who is a conquistador that landed on the Mexican coast and kind of made his way towards Tenochtitlan, which was the capital of the Aztec Empire. He knew along the way that the Aztec was not a unified nation, and he used that information to form alliances with many states that did not support the Aztec. He also kind of finds out that Montezuma II, who is the leader of the Aztecs, thinks that Cortez might be a god returning to reclaim the throne. Montezuma is fascinated by the horses that come over with the conquistadors, and he's also fascinated with their light skin. But another really, really important reason why the Spanish were able to conquer the Aztecs was the spread of the disease known as smallpox. Smallpox is a highly infectious and highly contagious disease that attacks the small blood vessels on the skin. This can eventually lead to death if untreated, and unfortunately for the Native Americans, there was no vaccine and there was no way to prevent the spread of such a catastrophic disease. On your left, you're going to see an image portrayed by the Aztec drawings of smallpox, and on my right, I have an image from a person that contracted smallpox in the 1800s. Now, I mentioned luck as one of the causes of why the Native American civilizations fell so quickly. Luck that smallpox was a disease that was able to infiltrate a population, and luck that, in this case, the Inca Empire was able to fall due to a war between two brothers that were trying to fight. The Civil War took place by the time Pizarro landed in Peru. And as the Inca Emperor Atahualpa went to greet the Spaniards, they took him captive and later killed him. Once this emperor was dead, the Inca Empire fell to the Spanish. Here is a picture of the ruins of the Inca Empire in Machu Picchu, Peru, along the Andes Mountains. To wrap up, we're going to reiterate how the great empires fell to such a small group of conquistadors. First, the Spanish weakened the Aztec and Inca empires by making alliances with their enemies. Next, the spread of disease such as smallpox ended up killing millions of Native Americans. And last, once the Spanish were under control, they acted brutally toward the Native American population. This will be further examined in Chapter 2, Section 3, The Spanish and the Native Americans. But until then, thank you very much for listening.